Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Glad to be here with you. I've got something a little different for you this time. I'm going to take you on a bit of a long-term history lesson, all about humanity, where we've been, where we're going. Although most of you know me as someone who usually talks about UFOs, this is about something a little bit different, something I have been covering from time to time, and now I have some fresh thoughts about it. So for the past couple of years, I've been thinking about the transition that's happening, not just to human civilization, but in my view, to the human species itself. And I've come to call this new existence the fourth stage of humanity. Sounds really grand, very ponderous. But basically, what I believe is that the human race is currently in the process of moving into its fourth fundamental form of existence. I wrote about this a little bit in my most recent book, The Alien Agendas, a little more than a year ago. I'll do a very quick recap. If you're new to this, it's very simple. The first of the stages, which we lived in for by far the longest period of time, was hunting and gathering. As Homo sapiens, we lived in that mode for, as far as what we can tell now, roughly 300,000 years. If you want to include our ancestors like Homo erectus, you can take it back to maybe almost 2 million years. In any case, that's how we evolved. It's how we lived. And then roughly about 10,000 years ago, we transitioned to a new form of living sparked by the agricultural revolution. And that change didn't happen overnight, but it took thousands of years. Going through the agricultural revolution changed humanity at a very basic level. This new phase of existence, let's call it stage 2, allowed for the creation of what we can call human civilization. It cleared the path to countless new inventions, new ideas. But even with all the new changes that happened, when you look back on it or compare it to our own time, stage 2 was still very stable when I look at it. The forms of living, especially by our standards of today, they really were quite constant. An ancient Egyptian farmer working the fields, he could have been dropped into a medieval village 4,000 years later. And yes, culture shock, language, got to learn a new language, new clothing. But really, when you get down to it, you would have a person who had been able to find his way to fit into the lifestyle of that place and that time. And that is because the basic forms and structures of everyday life would have been quite recognizable to that person. 5,000 years, and it would have been very, very consistent. So then, though, finally, we get to another dramatic change. It happened, say, about 300 years ago, give or take, and that's the scientific revolution and then the industrial revolution that followed right on top of it. And once again, this paved the way for a new form of human existence. Not simply new technologies or new forms of social organization, but new ways really of conceiving reality itself, new ideologies and a cosmology entirely different than anything humans had previously conceived of. Stage 3 of humanity. It's the age of science. And we were all born into stage 3. I would say late stage 3 of humanity. So now today, we're looking at a whole array of technologies that are working in a kind of synergy to transform humanity yet again. Everything from advanced genetic manipulation, strong AI, surveillance technologies of every kind, and robotics and algorithms to enhance or even replace traditional human labor, physical and mental labor. So these technologies, they're not just incremental, but I believe they are acting to create a completely new way for human beings to live together, to think about their world, to conceive of reality, and even to understand themselves. In my less optimistic moments, which admittedly are many, I've described it as turning human society into a giant anthill. Well, I'm sure it's more complicated than that, and I'll try to discuss some of the complexities in a little while here. At least when looking at our future in this new stage of existence, maybe we can say in fairness that it's a matter of perspective. Okay. So when I thought about humanity's prior transitions from stage 1 to stage 2, or from stage 2 to stage 3, I was thinking a lot about this, and I realized that people experienced psychological effects back in those days that were probably similar to what we feel today. So take the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture, for instance, going from stage 1 to stage 2, as I keep calling it. So mostly we tend to think of that change as a natural aspect of progress, developing agriculture, creating the foundations of human society. We would think of it maybe as an inevitability, and certainly we would think of it as an improvement, right? I mean, after all, we were able, because we were able to settle down, and because we were able to grow food off the land and to domesticate animals for our personal benefit. It's for those reasons that we were able to create a new form of social organization. It led to metallurgy, it led to writing, and so much more. It allowed human beings to dominate the world. But it's also true that in many ways, the agricultural revolution made life much more difficult for the people involved. I mean, even to the point where the quality of their food worsened, did not improve, it got worse. The quality of their health often declined. And you can make a really good argument that people were much less free and even less happy after the transition to agriculture. I realize it's not easy always to measure something like happiness, but it's not hard to come to this conclusion. We know that people work longer hours, for example. We also know that they had to be organized within a strictly hierarchical social system in which some people clearly benefited while many others did not benefit. We know that diseases began to spread within these crowded, congested human settlements. That's something that had never happened before. And we can also reasonably infer that this great change forced people into a major psychological adjustment just to be able to function in this new situation. I'm only speculating here, but I think it's worth considering the role that religion had to play in helping to make that transition possible. In each of these transitions, and we're going to get to the present time, but there always has to be a way to get inside the head of the people to get them to be on board with us. And I think in the transition to the agricultural system, that role was played by religions. For obvious reasons, we don't know of the specific beliefs that people had prior to the invention of writing. We've had indications of widespread fertility worship. You think about the various statuettes that have been discovered, 15, 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. Most famous one is the Venus of Willendorf, but there are many others. But the fact is, nothing was written down. We don't really know the specifics of what those people actually believed. Some kind of religious belief system, most likely. But what we do know is what the ancient Babylonians, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Hebrews, and others believed, because guess what? They left us their written stories. We know that these ancient religions demanded, for the most part, almost always, absolute obedience in the form of proper worship of the gods and proper social behavior, because the God said so. All right. For me personally, in the last 12 months or so, I've been going through a lot of this ancient literature. I've just been obsessed by it at times. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hebrew Bible, the Iliad, the Odyssey, I've been reading them, and a few other bits of ancient writing. It's a great journey. It's fascinating into the ancient mind. And one thing you notice is how important it was for ancient people to conduct proper worship of the gods. That almost gave complete meaning to the lives of people in the past. You look in the case of the Hebrews, their priests had what I would say is a genius to invent a monotheistic belief system, which focused all the energies of that people onto just one God, who happened to be a very jealous God and who happened to control every aspect of their daily lives, not just what they were supposed to believe, but every detail, down to the foods you're supposed to eat and the specific forms of interactions you're to have with each other and outsiders, down to the amount of money you give to the priest class. And I mean, everything. You talk about a way to get inside someone's head. And it wasn't just the Hebrews. It was all of these ancient societies. They all had some version of it. What you have is the development of an incredibly advanced form of social and mind control, probably the most advanced form of mind control that had yet been invented. And I'm not here even to trash the religions. I'm not even here to say, no, don't believe in the religions. I'm just saying they serve this very important purpose, as I see it. Whether the monotheistic ones, the polytheistic ones, they all enforced very strict adherence to most aspects of human behavior and belief. So my point is that throughout the ancient world, religions played a critical role in enforcing obedience to this new and frankly very difficult system of living, communal living with large groups of people. Something had to be done to transform the human psyche, to domesticate it, to break it. And again, this is not to criticize religions. Like, I don't know what other solutions were available to ancient people if they really wanted this new form of social organization to work. I mean, you ask yourself, what else could there have been? You got a type of human being who, by our standards of today, would certainly be considered violent, willing to kill outsiders at the drop of a hat, even infants that didn't fit the proper parameters. They did human sacrifice many places. They were, generally speaking, just plain brutal in ways that we normally don't think about. You know, violence was everywhere. There's overwhelming evidence in prehistorical Neolithic communities of warfare among all these scattered human tribes, even before we had settled communities. So, in my opinion, it's almost certainly the reason why when you look at all the first large human settlements, what do they have going around them? Big, thick walls. It's not to keep the goats in. These are 10-foot thick walls in some cases. That's to keep invading men armies out, or proto armies out. So we've had violence going all the way back. So my point is, if you're going to have all these people somehow live together in larger groups, you sure need to find a way to change them so that they're not constantly at each other's throats. And really, when you think about it, how else do you do it other than through religion? What better method to get inside someone's head and make them believe something that will force them to behave, right? So anyway, that's what I think happened. And then you move forward in time. I think a similar transformation took place during the jump to stage 3, the age of science, the age of industry. And once again, just like in the prior period, people experienced major changes in transitioning from what was then a predominantly agricultural to a predominantly industrial system. And it happened very quickly. And, you know, very, very soon you had millions of people working long hours in these cramped, unhealthy, dangerous working conditions, living in these overcrowded and violent slums that had just sprung up. And this was children as well as adults working in these conditions. And of course, everyone did this for just barely enough to survive on. So yeah, I would say that was an unpleasant transition for a huge number of people. And, you know, once again, you have to have had a system that would get people on board with this. And I just want to point out, in terms of the proto-capitalist system that I was just describing, that was an exploitative system for sure. It treated human beings basically as just so much fodder for the creation of someone else's wealth. Nevertheless, I think it must be said that system managed to create tremendous wealth, not just for those at the top, but for a fairly large portion of society, and a portion that grew larger with each passing generation. It wasn't a system that creates equality, but it was a system that creates wealth. And even for a lot of people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, not everyone, but a lot of people. So, but in any case, like the previous transition before that, this one also brought its own intellectual revolution, and for the exact same reason, in order to facilitate the changes that the new social organization demanded, to get the people on board. So the new ideologies of that era, starting around 300 years ago, were basically, a philosophy of individual rights combined with the worship of science, basically, all to facilitate capitalism and consumerism, which basically go hand in hand. And those philosophies and those attitudes were appropriate to that stage. So again, individualism and consumerism, and science, I think, have been the really critical philosophies to support this new stage of humanity. But there are others as well that for a while were very important, still kind of pop their head in there. One would be nationalism, very critical during the early phase of that whole stage. Definitely helped people to be motivated to do the dirty jobs that the system demanded. Religion and belief in God certainly stayed in the mix for a while. Both nationalism and the belief in God really getting weaker with each passing generation, it seems to me. And really, I think this is significant because over time, as nations became wealthier and societal decadence made itself, painfully obvious, um, nationalism and a belief in God really became so much less prominent in the daily lives of people. Think about the end of the Cold War, just 30 years ago. By that time, what did the Western world really have? Not much more than crass individualism and consumerism to keep that whole form of human society going. This was work ethics that were still there, but what was the work ethic for? It was so that you would have the reward, that all these rewards were personal, purely personal. Think of the TV commercials that would say things like, because you deserve it. That's everywhere. We still have that. Now, during nearly all that time, the main method, the main means by which to convince people to change their minds and behaviors, we could probably say would be the media. So whereas in the previous transition, the earlier transition, you've got the power of religion, churches, temples, and so on. Now, in the 19th and 20th century, to get people really on board with this new era, you've got secular media, newspapers, radio, television, all controlled by powerful people with lots of money, and using this quite obviously to mold the next generation of citizen, the next generation of consumer. Someone that could function within the scientific, capitalist, consumerist framework that had been created. Think of the career of someone like Edward Bernays, probably exemplifies that whole relationship. Okay, so again, that's just my take. Now, these changes, whether the first transition or the second transition, were all disruptive to society as it existed at that time, and as such was frequently resisted by ordinary people. Each especially in the early phases of those changes, I think, but each change of society required changing the human being itself, definitely psychologically, and even to some extent, maybe physically. Our physiology has gone through significant changes over the last 10,000 years. We're not the same as our hunter-gatherer ancestors, not in our body, not in our mind, definitely not in our social organization. But nor are we the same as our farming ancestors that came after. And today, you now see, I think it's probably becoming evident that the newest generations, in some ways, I think they're as alien to their grandparents as to all the prior versions of humanity. I think that's how fast the current changes are happening. So yes, we have now arrived at the next great transformation. It's been building momentum over the past few decades. Really since the creation of the internet, I think. And now it's being shifted into high gear, especially during these last 2 years of lockdown and global revolution under the pretext of COVID. This is the Great Reset. But really, the phrase Great Reset doesn't really describe the magnitude of this change. We're living in a true revolution, but not the kind of revolution you learn about in school. It's not a revolution inspired by the people and their desires. No. This is a revolution from above. And we've had those as well. And that is what we're looking at now. But unlike previous top-down revolutions from above, what we're dealing with now is unique because this one is global in scope. And that's never happened before. So we're seeing digital control being implemented around the world with incredible swiftness and coordination. And there is no way any reasonable person can argue that this has not been planned and premeditated for some time now. As one member of the World Economic Forum recently put it, this is Dr. Yuval Noah Harari, we're seeing the creation of a digital dictatorship. That's a phrase that he used. I think that's a pithy expression to describe basically the new global police state. By the way, I don't think he was promoting it as saying, oh, how wonderful this is. When you listen to him talk about it, and I've listened to him a few times, he does seem to be issuing this as a warning. Of course, he's saying it to the World Economic Forum, the very people who are like, oh, no, don't worry, we'll take care of this, Dr. Harari. Yeah, I'm sure they will. Now, look, when you think about all the changes that are going on, like, of course, people aren't going to like this. How could anyone like the idea of permanently losing their privacy? How could anyone like the idea of being subjected to propaganda, lies, 24/7 on a nonstop basis? How could anyone like the idea of being bludgeoned to conform to one ridiculous consensus after another? How could anyone like the idea of being beaten into submission because they know that speaking out means losing their job, losing their reputation, their place in society, even their ability to make a living sometimes? And clearly no one likes that. And yet this is happening. It's happening nevertheless. The means by which this is happening include, yes, the old legacy media, which did such a great job of mind control during the 20th century, now combined with the even more powerful big tech, Google, Facebook, Twitter, which clearly, obviously, are serving the cause of revolution that top tier of global elites have for so long been hankering. They want that. Now, from the point of view of those initiating this revolution, it is essential to have as much mind control over the population as you can. Just like the introduction of dogmatic religions thousands of years ago were, or the introduction of an individualist, consumerist ideology more recently. Now we are seeing the introduction of something new. We're getting all this sanctimonious moralizing through big tech and legacy media platforms, right? Combined with ever greater digital and real life punishments for those who disobey. So for this new stage of humanity, we're looking at a much more collectivist ideology than what was promoted during stage 3. And it has to be that way in order to make this new system work. You can't have a bunch of individualistic cowboys running around when you're trying to control them like so many bees in a hive. There's a whole bunch of other qualities now that of this revolution that are also becoming more defined as we keep moving forward. The idea of no privacy is a big part of the new collectivism. In fact, you could say it's one of the key things driving it. We're seeing over and over again how someone's personal statement from a decade ago or more can come back and be used against them in today's world, sometimes with the effect of just destroying their career. We see this all the time now. And we know we are in an era in which anyone can be recorded with or without their knowledge at virtually any time. That creates a culture, not just a paranoia, which it definitely does that, but the sanctimoniousness that we see all around us. You know, if you know that anything you say is liable to be transported to the other side of the world, then you almost have to become a hypocrite. You have to say things that you don't really believe just in order to survive. We all know this. You've got to become holier than thou. So, of course, a better survival tactic is actually to learn to believe the mantras that are being spread all around you. That's the best way. That's a survival tactic. As the philosopher George Costanza once put it, it's not a lie if you believe it. If you ever watched that episode. But seriously, we're seeing the creation of a kind of human group mind. You see it geopolitically with the media that parrots all the talking points of the Western-dominated globalist system. I mean, dissent is not allowed there. That's for sure. But you see it also in our private world, in which the personal becomes political. So that is, your personal choices and your personal beliefs more and more are seen by others as either politically acceptable or not. And that's a very good depiction of totalitarianism, whether it's fascist or communist, doesn't matter. In those societies, everything you do, public or private, is considered as something to be judged by the state. There's no personal world in those societies. That doesn't exist. And it's not difficult to see that this is clearly the direction in which the entire world is rapidly moving. You know, the Western world used to take pride in differentiating the private from the public and indicating, explicitly stating that people were allowed their private sanctuary of their world, their mind. Well, that's going away, right? And this is all happening. It's being driven in large part by the new technologies that allow for mass surveillance, the algorithms that can influence your internet search results, or even the rewards and punishments that you receive as a result of your beliefs. And again, this is because controlling your beliefs has suddenly become very important in order to facilitate this global revolution. And let me take a moment to describe the end game of the global revolution. I feel like an ancient sailor on a ship. He's now able to see the land ahead. Can't get it all, but we can certainly see some very specific contours here. So it's a world essentially of total centralized digital control. So smart devices all around you monitoring everything you do, everything you eat, the temperature in your home, the speed you're driving your car, the interactions you have digitally and in real life. I mean, at some point, all of real life will be digital. It'll be digitally monitored and controlled. You'll be monitored about the things that you speak about. And the government will decide, do they like what you speak about or do they not like what you speak about? A world in which starting a new business venture is going to become more and more difficult, I think, especially now. We can see after the lockdowns have destroyed so much of the middle class and the smaller entrepreneurial class, really leaving the field to the giant producers and distributors, right? Google and Amazon are huge winners of the lockdowns. So less economic freedom, total information surveillance on literally everything you do, complete immersion in the digital metaverse or whatever version of the digital universe they're going to create for us. At some point, the rollout of a universal basic income, because let's face it, what are most people going to be able to do to make a living when algorithms and machines increasingly are going to take the place of human physical and human mental labor? I mean, yeah, I'm sure there will be new jobs. We cannot imagine now. People tell me this frequently enough. I'm sure that will be the case. But seriously, how are people really going to survive here? We're moving toward an era of greater and greater structural unemployment, and I'm not the only one who's looking at this problem. All right? These people with nothing to do are going to have to become wards of the state, and that's why UBI will be justified. And when you are a ward of the state, guess who's in charge of your life? Not you. Okay? So that's a partial view of the world that we're looking at. I didn't mention the fact that advanced AI will certainly be getting to a point of being used by military and intelligence and financial and big tech groups as forms not just for cyber warfare and information dominance. Yes, I mean, they're doing all of this now, of course, but also to be used against entire populations. I mean, frankly, I'm sure that's happening right now. And it's only just going to get more and more powerful over the coming decade and beyond. None of this was ever possible before, never in human history, not like this, not ever. So you've got to ask yourself, how will this change the human being, human psychology? Well, look around you. You're seeing it happen already. You're not blind, I'm sure. You can see this as well as I can. So just like our previous transformations, this one that we're going through now is going to have winners and losers. I mean, of course, there's always going to be winners. There's always winners. The question is, how bad is it going to be for the losers? How many losers will there be? And how long are they going to be losers in this system? Like, those are questions that are worth asking. I don't have an answer to that, but certainly we have to assume. Now, for the short term, I don't think there's any question there's going to be many losers, big time. These are the unreconcilables. No matter what happens, they're just the dinosaurs who were raised within a belief system and ethos that just is not going to work in this new world, right? Like me, and probably many of you. These are the people who continue to believe in freedom, intellectual freedom, political freedom, economic freedom. Well, there's not much for them to do except maybe go down swinging like Tom Petty once sang. The question is, if they do enough swinging, can they make a difference? And I'm going to end this talk by coming back to exactly that point. So don't get too discouraged just yet. But then you look at the long term. Now, here's where quite a few people will reassure me that in the long run, things will find a way to even out. They'll become better. They'll be like a genuine new normal, not the current horrible dystopian new normal that we're living in today, but no, something actually that's better. All right. And, maybe you can think, well, maybe the new generation's coming in the future. Maybe they'll actually want these changes. A lot of them do seem to be very positive about these technological changes that basically eliminate all freedom, all privacy. It does seem to be, all right? And you could say, well, maybe people just usually find a way to adapt. So, maybe I'm wrong about this whole bleak view of mine, and I would love to be wrong. I hope that I'm wrong. I mean, one thing you could definitely say, it's a pretty easy argument to make, that the agricultural revolution, the scientific revolutions that preceded this ended up being a net gain or benefit for most people. Maybe not for the other life forms we share the planet with, but, they provided benefits that probably none of us want to lose, right? And so you could say, well, similarly, maybe it's a good bet that stage 4, let's call it the transhumanist stage, all right, that's going to bring benefits to people. Most likely a couple of them at first, but who knows? Maybe there'll be more and more in the long run, an ever greater percentage of people over time. And look, I'm not going to say that that's impossible, but I'll just be honest. What do I really say? What I say is a multiplicity of human types in the future, like we're talking total genetic modification here, right? So in an era of genetic mastery, backed by very strong artificial intelligence that will undoubtedly help modifying the human genome in all kinds of ways that I can't even imagine. So there's going to be capabilities galore coming up really soon, most likely. We're going to have ethical debates and all that, but it's going to happen. It won't even necessarily happen legally above board, but it's going to happen. So some of these human types, I'm sure, will be custom designed by the state or the black budget or somewhere. More likely, they'll be designed by the algorithm that we're probably all going to be serving at some point or another. Or, hey, you all know that I believe in UFOs and aliens, so maybe let's just go there. The alien algo. Maybe I've often wondered if extraterrestrials that are here serve their own algorithms. And that's what they work in service of. And I actually, I've talked about this quite a bit on my own website, and I think it's entirely possible. But whatever it is, I think service to the algorithms lies ahead, and custom designed human beings lie in the future. And I think some of these future versions of us, yes, undoubtedly, they'll have better technology, maybe better physical health, longer life, any number of other positive physical attributes, cognitive, mental attributes you can shake a stick at. Yes, I think that by our current standards, these people will seem superhuman to us. And not just because of their enhanced genetics, which, yes, but also because of all sorts of technology, implants, cognitive implants, connection to the cloud, the web, whatever, most likely. And, they'll be the ones running things, sipping the white wine and enjoying the future 5-star hotels or whatever. I wonder, will they actually be living in the real world, or will they, like the rest of us poor slobs, probably be lost in total immersion into any number of virtual fantasy worlds that undoubtedly will be available? You got to wonder, because whoever's running the show, that's probably not going to be the case. I think if our ruling human elite is doing, if they're ensconced in their own little virtual reality world, then I think we can safely predict this will be a world run by algorithms or a world run by the aliens, since I'm going to take a guess here that algorithms and aliens are not dominated by dopamine hits. That's our kryptonite, not theirs. So any number of human types in the future, yes, I think that's part of our future. And think of a guy like Aldous Huxley, by the way, who wrote Brave New World. You talk about genius. How did that man see so clearly? In a book he wrote 90 years ago, he wrote this book, but amazing. But anyway, probably all future types of human will be living in service to one addiction or another, realistically, because it's all about control. An endless supply of, whatever your supply is, all in the name of control, and all willingly accepted. This is what I think. So maybe they'll be happy after all. Maybe will Klaus Schwab turn out to be right? Own nothing, be happy. Remember that old song, Don't Worry, Be Happy? Well, this will be the new version. Own nothing, be happy. You don't even own your future mind, because that too is likely to be hacked. But we're going to make you happy. Purchased at the expense of your freedom and all those future, versions of Soma tablets, like they had in Brave New World, happy pills. So I get to wonder, will there be future renegades to this digital dictatorship of the future, if that's what happens? Will there be those who just don't fit in? I have to think so, but you got to wonder what their fate will be. And I wonder if I wonder if one of them in the future will be watching this video, if it's available, and be like, wow, that's what it was like to see the future at the edge of a precipice. I guess what I'm getting at here is I think the real benefit, the real reason for this coming fourth stage of humanity, it's not really going to be for the individual. It's not to benefit individual beings. I mean, yes, there's going to be a few who really benefit a lot from it, but I think that it's going to make a huge impact on humanity as a collective. I think that's what this transformation is all about. And yes, and the personal enrichment and power for very few. Oh, yes. But definitely vastly increased power for the species as a whole under whatever new form of control that's going to exist. Some kind of digital dictatorship type control clearly is going to be happening. I suspect that old-fashioned, unenhanced Homo sapiens like us, I don't think we're going to be encouraged to attend this party of the future. I do suspect there will be all kinds of transhumans in attendance serving the algorithm or the alien algorithm. This is why I think that the transformation that we're going through is, I don't want to say this, but I think that it's probably inevitable and it might be unstoppable. We're turning ourselves into a totalitarian anthill with the destruction of all the things that once brought life meaning. Things like family, things like genuine personal relationships. But I mean, in an era of relentlessly powerful artificial intelligence, quantum computing, at least soon to be quantum computing, genetic mastery, and all the rest, we're becoming a very powerful species. Very powerful. As long as we don't erase ourselves and all life on this planet, we're becoming incredibly powerful. And so for me to keep repeating a tired point, I do think this is why we are being visited by every species in our galactic or interdimensional neighborhood at this time. And yes, I mean, if you're new to UFOs, if you've never heard me before, if you just stumbled on this video and you're like, what, UFOs? All right, I'm out of the room. I would just say, you know what? Before you make a judgment, get on top of some of the evidence. There's a tremendous amount of evidence. I have reported a lot of it myself. It's on my websites, in my books, and much more powerful and better evidence than the very tepid statements that are coming out in the major media these days about UAP, and sometimes the Navy runs into these things. Let me just say that there is much more of an overwhelming abundance of objects that are not supposed to exist, that do exist, that have been here for generations, and they are not easily explained. So there's something going on here, and my personal opinion is that yes, we are the subject of tremendous interest by a number of groups right now for obvious reasons. This is the reason. We are going through this massive transformation now that's going to be taking us to something approximating something closer to a level that these other beings are already at. That's what I believe. Anyway, that's all of an aside here from my main point here. For us, for our society, all of these new technologies, all of them coming into existence nearly all at once, it's already causing a massive reorganization of our society, of our species, really. And with it, we're seeing a globally coordinated effort to harness the human spirit so that it conforms with the new system. So that's what I think. And for so many reasons, I just see all of this as a horrible, great tragedy, a real tragedy. I mean, I think we all probably recognize that human intelligence is unique. But in my view, it's much more unique than we probably realize. And I think I'm going to come back to this theme in the future, but for right here, I'm just going to say, I think that the fact that human beings learn to live in large groups at all, that's an amazing achievement that we hardly ever discuss. Like the fact that we live in these large communities. I mean, think, for eons and eons, we didn't live in large groups. And then we began to. And then those groups became more larger and more complex. I mean, that is an amazing thing. And it has given us tremendous power. And that's really the whole point of all of those transformations. It's essentially a more complex human organization that we have been talking about. And we're going through another one right now. So all of that's incredible. But don't forget something. We're still animals. We are still animals. We are naked apes with genius intellect. Yeah. We got lots of initiative. We have lots of aggression. I think the initiative and aggression really probably go together. And also, in the last brief period of time, we've cultivated this incredible idea of human freedom. We've turned ourselves into just fascinating creatures. And here's the tragedy, if you care to see it this way. The tragedy is that at the very moment of our triumph, the moment that we attain the power of the gods, as it were, at this very moment, we're likely to become divorced from the true, better angels of our nature, as Lincoln once put it. To be separated from those qualities that made us so special to begin with. We're seeing new systems of control that are being brought in to transform all of us, to keep us compliant within the radically new system of human organization. And quite possibly with the intention of our new bosses to keep us friendly, or at least to keep us compliant in the interstellar sandbox. Maybe that's part of it. Turn us into something like the Borg, in the Star Trek series. So that we're acceptable to the communities out there. Is that it? I don't know. But you can see this transformation is complicated. This movement into the next stage of humanity. I mean, for me, I just want to throw a wrench into the whole process and say, stop, let's back up. But I know that's impossible, let's face it. But does any of us think that there are opportunities for a genuinely better way for human beings to live? I mean, who doesn't think that? So there are definitely opportunities that we can take that I think will lessen suffering, promote sanity, and promote a genuinely healthy life, according to what the philosophers once called natural law. I don't think that's impossible. As the years have gone by, I have become more and more of a fan of Carl Jung, the great psychologist. Jung was really amazing. I think he was the greatest psychologist of the 20th century. And it took me a long time to get to that opinion because, well, it took me many years to get past the prejudices of the modern academic mind, to be honest about it. I mean, it's true, especially they had a real problem with the mystical, or at least the sides of Jung that academic and the psychologists saw as mystical and spiritual. They are not that way. The academic community is anti-mystical, anti-spiritual. And it's always been like that. And so Jung was very heavily criticized by his peers for some of his ideas, like this idea of the collective unconscious. Some of them thinking, what gobbledygook. Well, I think what Jung was saying is that you don't just throw off thousands of years of the past, okay? You carry it inside you, even if you don't know it. Jung didn't have the science of genetics supporting him at that time, although I personally think his ideas do now have a lot of support from genetics. I think that Jung was right, that we do carry the past inside us, and it's encoded right into our genetics. We aren't just moldable plastic, all right, like the major psychologists of the whole 20th century believed, and I think what many of them still believe today. Like, no, I don't think that you can just change what you are because you think you can just change and be whatever you think you can be. You carry a long, long legacy inside you. And by thinking it can just be changed into some transhumanist utopian version of yourself is only probably setting you and your society up for even greater levels of mental illness. And I do think that modern society, by its very nature, creates mental illness because I just don't think that we are fully designed to live in these large collectives. We're not ants. Ants are designed to do that. We have had to adapt to these types of environments. And so therefore, yes, I do think all kinds of societal maladaptations occur, and that includes all kinds of mental illnesses. All right? So, what has every ancient philosophy, every ancient religious tradition, every ancient mystery school, what have they all said to us? They have all said, know yourself. Know yourself. It seems so simple, but of course it's not simple. To do it fully, well, it's probably impossible. I mean, we're deep, deep, deep wells, all of us. And no, we're never going to understand ourselves fully. But I do think we can try, and I do think we can have some levels of success here. And I do believe that one important element of self-understanding, of self-knowledge, is to recognize that we come from a long chain of humanity that preceded us. And thinking we can just break the chain overnight, I think that's not simply arrogant. It's not simply naive, but I think it's incredibly dangerous. Over a long period of time, maybe we can find a way to, you could defend the slow buildup of all of these changes that I've been discussing, that we're seeing over a long period of time. And by slow, I mean slow. Many generations. That would be better. I don't know how many generations, but many. But that's obviously not what we're seeing. We're seeing a revolution that's swift and a revolution that is literally unnatural. It is unnatural. And it's not solely being pushed by the nefarious global elite. Yes, they are nefarious, even though they think that they are literal saviors of humanity. I think they think that. But no, they're not the only reason that this is happening. All right. The very technologies and sciences, the very competitive nature of the institutions that we've created around the world, all of those things, those are moving things with an unbelievable speed. I think it's truly a case of this whole thing's happening in part by design, yeah, but in part by default, design and default. I think it's both. So I know where I stand. I don't support this revolution. I never will. It's probable that long-term change will continue to be an inevitability. Okay. I can't deny that. But I can never see any way to defend or justify this obvious movement toward a global digital dictatorship, and I want nothing to do with it. And I don't know if this makes me a hopeless romantic dreaming of a past that can never be revived, or if there really is another way forward. For me, I can't give up on the idea that there is another way forward. Is it simply my own lack of imagination that causes me to give up, to resist the idea of abandoning human freedom and liberty because I'm still attached to those ideas? Or is it my own lack of imagination that prevents me from seeing how to accomplish what seems to be impossible? That is, of fighting the movement toward becoming a human anthill. I guess I'm going to wrap it up with this thought. I think the one important way that everyone can help, one way that everyone can genuinely resist this one-size-fits-all version of human thinking and human living that's clearly being rolled out in service to the know-it-all nanny state. One way that we can all help ourselves and to resist that is for each of us to find the thing inside us that is bigger than we are, the thing that we are willing to live our lives in service of. Parents can find it maybe in raising their children, or you can find it in a meaningful relationship with someone you love. You can find it in your family and your friends. You can find it in God. And you can also find it in a destiny. In other words, something that you love to do, that you love to do so much that you just know, like, this is the thing you were meant to do. And maybe not everyone finds that, but if you're lucky, you can find that. Socrates, the great philosopher of ancient Greek, he said that he was impelled to ask the questions that he did because of a demon or daimon that inhabited him. Not a demon in the sense that we think of today, more like being literally inspired, having a spirit in you, driving you, like Van Gogh or Michelangelo, just having to create, right? We don't have to be as talented as they were, but we can also find the thing that drives us. And I think the reason this is so important in today's world is because it gives us a sense of independence from the state. I think that's what matters here. We're serving a higher purpose that has come to us independently, authentically. We separate ourselves out from the herd, the great many people who unfortunately are under the sway, hypnotized by the system, captured by the system. So what you can do is you separate yourself out. You follow the authentic beat of the drummer that's inside you. One of Jung's 12 archetypes, by the way, was the rebel. And I'm not saying that that's all you should be, but I am saying it's one of the fundamental human orientations that he identified in his archetypes. And I think it's especially important in an era of growing centralization and control to lean into some of those archetypes. They are ancient representations of fundamental human typologies. That's what they are. They go thousands and thousands of years back. And there's something in there for each of us. So I think by leaning into some of those ideas and finding your destiny is something that can enable us to retain our humanity in what is truly an inhuman era. Well, that's all I got. So thanks for being here with me. As always, if you like what I do, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications. You can also support me by checking out richardolanmembers.com, where I talk about like this that I've talked about here and all other related topics. I do this every week. I hope to see you there. And thank you again for your support. In these difficult and truly insane times, it's important for us to remember to keep our chin up and to keep fighting the good fight. Thanks again. Catch you later.